Here I am.
Hey everybody, this is Kim and this is Pistachio.
Clearly,
And
pistachio is the star.
as long as we're not saying anything interesting, Pistachio will be the star.
Yeah. Oh my
So,
God. I love that he's like floating above my head.
so we're gonna wait for 1:30. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Not 12:30, Jim.
Yeah. And so anybody who was on an hour ago got to see a little
A
preview of my
preview.
time management skills.
Yeah, as I was eating my salad, going, oh,
Thank goodness you were on, Kim.
well, yeah, I just happened to have my phone open on Instagram and I got the Carleton Futures Live and I was like, oh, I might as well see what they're doing. And then it was
Yeah.
you. Hi,
So,
Pistache.
so everybody, we're just shooting the shit a little bit, waiting for 1:30 Eastern
Am I,
time.
can I use filters for this or is that unprofessional?
I think it's plenty professional, but
Well, I'm just gonna.
you don't
Ooh,
need filters, Kim.
uh,
The dog. This dog is my filter.
that's fair. I'm just trying to get the best because the room I'm in, I don't like the light in behind me. You know what I mean?
I think you look fine.
All right, all right.
So yeah, just everybody. This is Jim Davies and Dr. Kim Pallemans, and we are gonna go. We're gonna talk to you a little bit in about 3 minutes. So we're just killing some time now.
Yep, we're
I
just.
had my first faculty meeting today on Zoom.
Oh, how'd that go?
Somebody took a Brady Bunch style picture of everybody at once. So
Yeah, we had. I think I did ours. We've had four since the pandemic started, and we had
wow.
yeah. Because I'm trying to touch base with my faculty regularly. I think more
Okay.
communication is better right now.
Okay.
Just because we have a lot of issues with the animals and the research, right?
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, it's more problematic. And Senate on Zoom was wild. There was 83 senators. So for those of
That's
you that
amazing.
are joining, hi, see you, Raven Aaron. For those of you that don't know what Senate is, it's the highest academic body at Carleton,
Yeah.
and it's chaired by the president, and that's how all the academic decisions are made. They have to, everything has to funnel and get up through Senate. So, for example, graduating students, the reason that you're able to graduate and get your degree is because it gets approved at Senate. So hello, Pistachio. So it would be very, very bad if we weren't able to make those decisions during the pandemic because then students wouldn't be able to graduate, and that would be a
Right.
darn shame.
Those of you just entering, we are about to start the interesting content in 2 minutes.
Interesting content. How can we tell? Oh, hello, someone here is in India. That's amazing. Hello,
Oh my God.
to
It must be
India.
like middle of the night.
That's awesome. Yeah. What time is it in India? Let us know.
It must be like 10 hours ahead.
Geography is not my strong suit.
But the geography that so speaking of geography of the brain, I was trying to figure out, and there's no short answer for this, so I probably shouldn't bring it up, Kim. I was trying to figure out if physical actions start in the basal ganglia or the premotor cortex.
Like when you're actually like raise my hand.
Yeah.
So that intentional movement starts in the premotor cortex. Basal
Yeah.
ganglia is more there for unconscious, like walking, right?
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
also
yeah,
saw a
yeah.
study that shows like the force and the distance, all the magnitudes are calculated by the basal ganglia or something. Like if you're reaching for something or like, so the motor
No,
planning
that to me
happens
is
in the.
more, that's got to be cortical, right? Motor planning.
You're the expert. This is just what I read
Oh,
yesterday. So
Bangladesh, we got Toronto. I'm just checking in
Bangladesh
here.
and Toronto, Pistachio. It's amazing. All right, it's
Amazing.
1:30.
It's 1:30.
Okay, everybody. So my name is Dr. Jim Davies. This is my dog Pistachio. If you take a class with me, the dog will not be on campus, but if it's an online lecture, you might get the dog. Kim, you want to
That
introduce
is
yourself?
super exciting. Hello from Aruba. Oh my gosh. So my name is Dr. Kim Pallemans. I'm the current chair of the Department of Neuroscience, and that's Rwanda. Wow. And I do teach first year. So if anybody is going to be taking first year classes, I teach an introduction to neuroscience of psychiatric disease. And so, yeah, Oh, I'm seeing so Nova Scotia. This is amazing. I'm seeing all over the world. Kenya. Wow. Iran. This is
Yeah,
amazing.
so we both teach classes, and we both teach video classes. So it might be that
Cheers.
Carleton's September classes are going to be starting off online, at least. Probably good probability.
Mm-hmm.
We both teach big classes,
Oh,
or I teach a very
awesome.
big class. And mine's called Mysteries of the Mind. And Kim, what's yours called?
The Neuroscience of Psychiatric Disease. So it's NER 1202. You can take it as elective. You don't even need to have any science background. I will teach you, right, Allison? Allison was in my class on the fall. She's logged in. Hello from Ecuador. So
I
we're
remember
here to
all
talk.
1,000
What?
students from my class too.
Yes. I remember all 10,000 students that I've ever taught over the last 10 years. So we're here today to talk to you a little bit about mental health. And I'm sure you guys, no matter where you are in the world, you're experiencing some change, right? Your routines have changed. Most of you are probably living at home, probably with your parents. And it's probably been difficult for you to be so disconnected from your social groups, right? So living in these times are very interesting. And we're here to talk to you a little bit about how social isolation, the pandemic is influencing your mental health and well-being, and how to prepare you guys for the fall and what it feels like to be a student. Oh, future CogSci student here. Woo, woo.
Yeah, so we you want to start with like what's the difference between social distancing and physical distancing?
So physical, so I don't know if you guys are paying attention to when the government started, well, at least in Canada, I don't know, all over the world, what kind of messaging they were giving out. But when the pandemic was really reaching its kind of critical peak, the Canadian government gave people they told us we needed to stay home, right? And we needed to socially distance ourselves from other people. And initially that messaging was kind of really challenging because social distancing is very different from physical distancing. So physical distancing means like being at least 6 feet away, 2 meters from other people if you're out in public, out taking a walk or in the grocery stores, for example. And you should only be making contacts with people who are already living in your household. But that is different from social distancing or even social isolation, because social distancing is really disconnecting yourselves completely or socially from people in your networks. And we want to make the point very clear that what is happening right now is not social distancing and not social isolation, because that is actually really bad for your brain and therefore your mental health. Jim, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, they changed the language from social distancing to physical distancing to try to emphasize this, because you can have fairly good social connections through electronic media, but it's got to be in a specific way. So there's been a great change over the generations that younger people don't like to make phone calls as much. They do a lot of texting. They feel kind of uncomfortable making phone calls. I've heard about them like entering the business world and like having to make calls and being like uncomfortable with it. But it turns out that when it comes to having having a good social connection with somebody, having a voice interface is actually very important. In a way that texts and sharing posts on social media are not. So if you're actually talking to somebody through a video chat or on the phone or any kind of thing where you can actually hear their voice, you can get the very valuable social connection that's very important to mental and physical health.
And so does anybody have any, I know you guys can comment here, but you can certainly ask us questions, but I'm wondering if anybody knows why social isolation, it can contribute to ill mental health. Does anyone know? Disliking phone calls and an introvert thing, not a generational thing.
It actually is a generational thing, I believe. Mm-hmm. I don't know you, Rochelle, but
yeah.
But introverts of the it's probably an introvert thing too.
Yeah, probably a bit of both. Yeah. Well, I'll let you know why social isolation is so bad. Is because our brains are actually hardwired That's right. It's related to loneliness, right? So our brains are hardwired to code social isolation and loneliness as stressful. And that's because our ancestors that were roaming the savannah way back when, they were more likely to survive if they were living in groups, right? You imagine you would have more than one person that could help seek shelter, defend against enemies, help find food. So what that meant is our ancestors who coded loneliness and social isolation as a threat were more likely to seek out social connectedness and other humans to live in a social circle. And so what that means as social isolation being stressful is like when you're feeling lonely, and I'm sure all of us have felt lonely at particular times in our life, what happens is the brain then mounts a stress response. And the stress response initiates in the part of our brain known as the amygdala, which detects threats and fearful circumstances, and it pumps out a number of hormones and neurotransmitters. You guys probably have heard about cortisol or adrenaline, and that's initially a good thing because cortisol and adrenaline, what they do is they help the organism prepare for that fight or flight, right? So if you're alone, imagine you're dropped off in the middle of the Arctic Circle and you're by yourself. That cortisol and the adrenaline is going to get you moving to be able to seek out shelter or supports or other humans. The problem is when that social isolation is prolonged and we are unable to see an end to that social isolation, then we have long-term increase of cortisol and adrenaline that's pumping through our body. And this actually gets up into our brain, of course, so it starts in the brain, goes all throughout the body, and comes back into the brain. And with prolonged cortisol circulating through the bloodstream, this actually suppresses our immune system and makes it so that we're more at risk for disease and illnesses in the future. And of course, in this COVID era, we don't want to get sick, right? We don't want to have a suppressed immune system. So how it links to mental health is because the amygdala is part of it's a structure in the brain that's part of our other a circuit that codes for emotion and motivation. And long-term pumping out of that cortisol means that we code that over time as poor mood, high anxiety. So that's why it's really important to seek out those social connections in this way. What you're doing right now, you guys are connecting with us, you're connecting with your friends. Those are the best ways to keep healthy during a time when we're physically distancing from our loved ones.
Right.
Jim.
And I want to say that if we do have an entire episode on social connections. Kim and I have a podcast called Minding the Brain. If you want to check that out, we do have episodes on lots of interesting stuff from addiction to concussions to social networks. So Kim, what's the SAM pathway? Someone's asking. Allison.
Well, Allison was my student, so she knows the SAM pathway, which stands for sympathetic adrenal medullary pathway. So it starts out, yeah, I know. Come on, you want to take neuroscience, you learn those big words. It's so fun. That's the main pathway that's involved in the fast response to stress, as opposed to the slow response to stress, which is the HPA pathway, or hypothalamic pituitary adrenal. Oh, okay. Someone's asking about your glasses, Jim.
Yeah, but okay. The glasses, I don't say where I got them because I want them to be unique and no one else to have them. So we're just going to leave that as
they record his brain waves.
There was a question. Is there a point where physical distancing will be harmful to mental health? So I think that this matters a lot, the individual circumstances that you're in. There are people who are undergoing stress from many things. If they have kids and they've lost their job, and if they have a whole lot of stresses like that, or people who are completely alone, those people are going to have problems with mental health. So has there been invisible declines in public mental health? So people have claimed, many people, like over half of people have claimed that it has affected their mental health, but I have not seen any numbers.
I have the answer to that. Well, so it's an interesting question that you have _GD13 because my husband works in healthcare data, and he said a lot of those numbers are probably suppressed right now because everybody's really looking at the COVID data, right? So what we're looking at, our public health perspective, is looking at more of who's coming down with COVID and deaths by COVID. But certainly the unofficial data and there is evidence, I would say unofficially, that there are increased suicidality, certainly in the COVID era. And yes, the hotline calls, I know they've seen dramatic increase in people calling, for example, Ottawa telehealth phone lines, the crisis phone line. So we are definitely seeing issues with mental health. Impact
Right.
of
So
increased usage on computers. Yeah.
there was a question about using more computers and phones affecting mental health. That's a tricky one, because I think it really matters what you're using them for. Like if you're using them for voice chatting all day, then it's probably not bad for you. But if you are not getting physical exercise, or just multitasking all day, switching between different social media, that generally isn't good for you in any situation. If you're doing it all day, it's probably not great.
Yeah, and I should mention as well, scrolling through your news feeds can be really detrimental, particularly for those that struggle with anxiety, because what it's doing is it's your frontal lobe is constantly churning through all that information. And it's very hard for us not to pay attention to things about the COVID pandemic, which are worrisome, right? And there's a lot of things that we don't know and we can't control. And when we're constantly scrolling through and seeing all that sort of disaster language, it actually fuels and can worsen our anxiety. So it's important to use media, social media, computers, like Jim was saying, in a balanced way, right? It's good to connect with your friends. It's good to check in. Maybe the suggestion is maybe if you want to know about the news, take 10 minutes at the end of the day and then shut it off. But to be constantly absolutely on your screens is probably detrimental for your eyesight, if anything, but also for the reasons that you're not really taking the opportunity to have face-to-face conversations with people that you're around, and also being outside, right? So Rachel, it says that her mental health has positively been impacted because she was burning out from going to school every day. So that's a really interesting perspective, Rachel. And I'm sure, Rochelle, I'm sure you're not alone there.
Yeah. The Carleton's actually pretty well positioned to do online learning. Carleton has a really interesting long history of video lectures and stuff. Back when there were like 20 channels, there was a CUTV on the television. Like you could just get it over broadcast, and people would watch chemistry lectures or whatever. And then that transitioned into what's now called CUOL, the Carleton University Online. So a lot of Carleton professors are transitioned to the online teaching has been relatively smooth compared to some other schools.
Yeah, so we underscore GD13 has asked, have we been asked to prep? Yep. So that's, nobody's made a complete decision yet, but we have to be mindful of what's happening at a federal and provincial level, and we have to be listening to what our ministers are saying in terms of opening up various spaces, and university campuses are certainly a space where we need to be aware that there's lots of people interacting in lots of different physical spaces on campus. So it may not be the safest thing. It's harder for us to teach online, so preparing for that makes more sense than preparing for teaching in person. If we do end up going in person, that's an easier pivot to do that. So yes, we are being asked to prepare, and that would be across the province, right? So Carleton would not be the only university that would be preparing for that. There's one about green space. Jim, do you want to there's a comment there about green space. Do you want to address that one?
I missed it.
To what extent does exposure to nature and green space or lack thereof impact stress levels?
Yeah, sure. So there is some very good evidence that being out in nature is good for your stress and your happiness. There's a psychologist right at Carleton in the psychology department, John Zelensky, who did a neat study. One of the cool things about Carleton is that it's all connected with tunnels. So once you get to work, you can put on you can wear high heels all day, right, Kim, and never have to leave.
Oh yeah, I have FYI for those of you that take my class, like 60, 70 pairs of shoes. I do like my shoes, and I keep them all in my office.
Or neuroscience, you want to
take my class, or like cool outfits.
So John Zelensky in psychology, he did a study where he had students walking in the tunnels or outside to get from one class to another, and he found that people were happier walking outside, even in the winter. And Ottawa winters are serious business.
Yes, apologies to those from India, Bangladesh, Aruba.
You have no idea.
Buy your fleece now.
So Rochelle, so the doctor's notes thing, that is changing slowly. A lot of professors just default to having doctor's notes required. I don't, and that is because
I don't know what I do.
It is a big strain on the mental health, or not the mental health, but the healthcare system of Carleton
Ooh.
and of the country or whatever. So I don't actually require doctor's notes. They just have to declare that they're actually sick. So you can ask if a doctor's note is required, but a lot of people end up asking for doctor's notes when they're well, which is a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah, I think that Carleton's really moving away from, like Jim was saying, from requiring these doctor's notes because they are a pressure on the healthcare system. And I always lean towards compassion with my students because realistically, you got to trust your students, right? If somebody's not well, then they're not well. And I have my students declare an oath of self-declaration of illness. So if they're not well, they just fill it out and then they write the deferral.
Have you ever taken a class outside the lecture camp?
Say what now?
Have you ever said to the whole class, "It's a nice day, let's go outside"? Have you ever done that?
I wish, but I have 500 students. Where are we going to go?
In your smallest class?
No, I joke. It's 120, I think, is the smallest class that I've taught.
Yeah,
it's too much. But I would love to teach outside. That would be super fun. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back up on to some of the questions here. Cameron wants to know any thoughts on how this might affect introverts versus extroverts differently, or morning versus night people. And I guess you're asking about the pandemic and social isolation, maybe?
Right, probably.
And I think, Jim, you had some answers for that, right? The introverts.
Yeah, so this is interesting. John Zelensky should be here instead of me. I keep talking about his research, but he also found that introverts actually do need social connection. And when they are told to act like extroverts, they're happier, which is very interesting. So the introverts don't naturally try to interact with people as much as extroverts, but when they do, they are a little bit happier. So a lot of the common sayings about it is that it costs the introvert a little bit more energy to do it. But in terms of the happiness payoff, it's the same. In terms of morning and night people, I would think that that everybody sort of benefits from online stuff in terms of morning and night, because people have a little bit more flexibility when things are online, not always, but often to do things when they want to. So I have some nephews, and they're around 10 to 14 years old, and they sleep in, right? Because that's what happens when you're that age. You stay up late and you sleep late. And they just love the online learning because they are able to do their work when they want to, and they're able to sleep in a little bit, and their mind's a little bit fresher for doing the work when they want to.
So here's a bonus about potentially having classes online: is no 8:30s, right? if there's most unless a prof is still lecturing at 8:30 in the morning live on C-Learn, which would be, I think, cruel, but yeah, so you could take the classes whenever you want. Because I do know that my classes that are best attended, and because I'm the departmental chair, I get to have preference as to when I schedule my classes. So 1 to 2:30 is the sweet spot, because students are probably awake, they've probably eaten, and they're ready to come to class. Oh, Kelly's asking, hi, Kelly. How will COVID affect graduate programs and the research being done at Carleton? I miss you too, Kelly. So there is a lot of the decisions around the research and the graduate programs. We're recognizing how important it is for our graduate students to continue in their research spaces. So what we're looking at is a model wherein, if indeed the undergraduate students are online, and again, no decisions yet, this is all still part of the process. Hi, Pistachio. Is that we're going to try, again, being mindful of physical distancing and the regulations of the province, to have the graduate students and research being done as safely as possible. So that is being given potentially some privilege.
Okay, another question about staying up till 4 or 5 a.m. during COVID pandemic. Well, there could be a couple things going on. One is that you could naturally be a night person, and because of the not having to be in person in different places, you're actually reverting to your natural sleep schedule for this stage of your life. Another thing is that you might be keeping yourself up with screens.
How old are you?
Yeah, _GD13.
I'm going to guess you're 17. 10, oh my God.
But the screens are really bad for your sleep. I've just read a study, though, that if you dim the screen and you hold it 14 inches away,
18.
Then it does not suppress, I think it's melatonin or something. Yep, _GD13 is 18 years old, right? So that's the time. when you're probably an extreme night person, that will change over time. In your 30s, probably maybe 40s, you might become more of a morning person. And then in old age, people tend to be extreme morning people, even more than when they were like 5 or something like that.
Yeah, my niece is staying up till like 3, 4 a.m. She's 14, and my sister has to drag her out of bed at 1 o'clock. It's brutal. I think a lot of that is motivation, right? If there's no motivation because you don't have to get up, your age group, the tendency is to stay up late, right? I remember that too. I had no problem staying up till 3 or 4. Now I wake up, and Jim does too. Jim and I are both morning birds. Jim's up at 4:30.
Yeah, to this morning. This morning I slept until 5:30.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I always see Kim's like on her Twitter at like 5
6 a.m.
So if I want to retweet, I know when to do it for Kim.
Yeah.
Is reading right before you go to sleep benefit your sleep? Yes, but I would recommend using a dedicated e-reader with e-paper or a physical printed book rather than a backlit screen like an iPhone or an iPad or something.
So,
but yeah, reading's really good. Watching TV right up until bed is not a good idea.
I want to just have, because we got 8 minutes left, and I want to switch a little bit gear and talking about how to promote your mental health, because that's going to give a segue into the next Carleton Future Live cast. So this is, I feel like I have a classroom here. Does anybody know what are things that benefit your mental health? Like what are things that could promote well-being? Does anyone know?
I'll give you a hint.
Lavender oil help you sleep. Oh.
Pets.
He's so cute.
Actually, I don't know if I think this might be just correlational data, but people with pets are happier.
Actually, Kim Matheson in my department is studying this, and we've added a pet survey to our next research study looking at this.
She's doing a causal connection study?
Well, no, correlational.
Okay, exercise. About 5 people have said exercise and meditation. Those are good. They're not the best thing for your mental health, but they are good.
Eating healthy, yes. Why do you say it's not the best thing, Jim?
Because I know what the best thing is.
Staying at
social interaction. That's the most important thing. So it turns out that, well, actually, I don't know about mental health specifically, but for happiness and for longevity, nothing matters more than hanging out with people that you like and care about. More important than diet, more important than quitting smoking, more important than exercise. Having powerful social connections is the most important thing for happiness and longevity.
Fair, I'll give you that. Yes, there is a good epidemiological study. You live longer when you have, it's the quantity, not necessarily the quantity, but the quality of your social connection. So yes, Julia, family and friends is true. But yeah, all of you have hit all the nails on the head here. Puppies, sleep, diet, exercise, and social interactions. I call those the 4 pillars of mental health. And this is the most important thing for you guys that are going to university next year, right? And imagine the transition if you're physically on campus. A lot of you are going to be losing your main social supports, right? Your family, your friends that you're from high school. And there is good evidence that this is the hardest transition for people coming to a new city, new campus. So my recommendation to you all is the best way to boost your mental health, and because we do see increasing mental health challenges among the population of university students, is to create those peer connections, right? Join social groups, join clubs. In residence, they do amazing things in residence to try to create a sense of community in residence. Also make good connections with your professors. So Jim and myself, you've met us now. The people at Carleton are, I can tell you, hands down, are so fantastic. Your professors want to get to know you, and we can form part of your social connection and part of your community. So take advantage of people like us, and certainly the kind of preamble to the next series is that pets. There is good evidence that pets are very good for your mental health, and pet therapy, as you'll learn soon with Shannon Noonan, who runs the therapy dog program at Carleton, is really beneficial. We've seen a lot of success of the CU therapy dog.
Yeah, we have therapy dogs at Carleton. You can meet them and follow them on Instagram, and we also have a podcast episode about therapy. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I just want to scroll back. That Leng said online courses in the fall would be disadvantaged for overseas students because you have to stay up. Yes, that's why we're saying that if you can imagine, if you are in China, Aruba, India, and your prof is like, yeah, my lecture will be at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, that puts you at a disadvantage. So I would say, I sit on the Carleton University Scenario Planning Group, along with the president and the deputy provost and the provost, and we're really talking about the issue of student equity, right? And this would not be equitable to our students who are international. So in that case, it makes more sense to have asynchronous lecture delivery. And what that means is that the prof would record something, post a video into your learning platform, and then you can watch it on your own time. So definitely we're considering these issues of equity. Are the residence application forms still going out to new students? I don't know. I think this is a question that best suited for the folks at CU Future. Professors are awesome. Yes, they are. Any last questions? We've got 4 minutes.
Or ask anything about the mind or the brain.
Yeah,
we will say the answer, or we'll say we don't know.
The mind and the brain.
Oh, good, Kim.
See?
I don't even know if Kim used to believe in the mind. Now she does. Now she's been forced to podcast with me for a couple of years now.
Well, it's just because the neurons are the basis of the mind, right?
Yeah.
Where are these videos being posted? I don't know. I suspect somewhere.
The video, you mean this video that you're watching right now?
Yeah. I think so. I think it's recorded, right?
Yeah, after this, I'm going to record it and make sure that it gets out there.
Favorite Minding the Brain episode?
Our favorite? Oh, my.
I think so. You go ahead, Jim.
Okay. I think my favorite is probably the concussions one. I think that was really great. Kim?
I like the cannabis one.
Oh, cannabis.
That was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the cannabis.
Both are very high Kim episodes. Somebody asked the difference between the mind and the brain. I'm so glad you asked. So the difference between the mind and the brain.
How much time do we have?
So the mind is a description of thinking at an information process, and the brain is a description of the biological apparatus that implements it. So that sounds very abstract. So I'll try to make an analogy with computers. So Microsoft Word is kind of like a computer program, and it has make things bold, and you can print, and you can close windows and open windows. That does not have very, it makes sense to talk about how Microsoft Word works, for example, in terms of those informational properties, rather than the actual circuits and transistors on the computer chip. Similarly, if you want to talk about a memory or an emotion or a belief or a drive or an addiction or something like that, it's not always straightforward to talk about it in terms of the underlying biology. And in fact, it might be very different in different people. So my belief that Justin Trudeau is a prime minister, if you were to figure out exactly what's happening in my brain that allows me to believe that, it might look very different from yours, but it's the same belief. So when we talk about the mind, it's more about the information level, and the brain is more the biological foundation that implements it.
Wild. And if you take my class, you'll be able to see real brains. I have rat brains, I have dolphin brains, monkey brains, human brains.
You have dolphin brains?
We have dolphin brains.
So cool, Kim.
I know, right? Come to Neuro.
I have a brain eraser in my office. That's what I've got.
And Jim has a head that we can use to actually draw on.
We never did that, Kim.
I know. We should do that for the online classes.
So I think I had that's really good for like a Sharpie. So I think I should like come into Kim's class and like sit there and she like draws all the like lobes and
we should do it. Nerd 1202.
And then maybe like we can do it on a day where I can like go teach my class, and then I can point to my own head with a pointer.
That would be.
What is the name of your class? My class is called Mysteries of the Mind. It's Cognitive Science 1001. Kim, what's the name of your class?
And mine is Nerd 1202, the Introduction to the Neuroscience of Psychiatric Disease. Woo! All right.
Yeah, see you in the fall. Yes.
See you guys. It's been awesome.
Let's say goodbye to Pistachio too.
Oh, wait, hold on. I need to take a picture. Can I take a selfie?
Sure.
This was great, guys. Good luck with everything.
Thanks, everybody, and looking forward to seeing you at Carleton. Bye-bye.